Hello, cooking enthusiasts. I certainly took an interesting week to take a break from YouTube. Before I get into the main topic of this video, I thought it would be good to do just a general update and some housekeeping. First, in relation to the current pandemic going on. I'm doing well. I'm feeling well. Um, a little paranoid, but otherwise doing fine. And supplies are good over here. I know a few of you do get worried if I don't post, so I will take this opportunity to once again plug Instagram, Twitter, and even Facebook. I post on there pretty much every day, and in general, it's a good way to get in touch with me if you have cooking questions. I was already planning to switch to posting videos every other week or potentially every week, depending on what I had going on. I will attempt to post every other week at least, but going forward, I don't really see a point in working super hard to have a consistent schedule. The last piece of slightly disappointing news is that the fermentation related Kickstarter I was running is officially over and failed. I will be attempting to get that unique species of yeast at some point in the future, but I will simply deprioritize that particular project. But let's turn our attention to more exciting things. As you have been seeing on screen, I bought a KitchenAid grain mill attachment for making my own flours. So far, it's working pretty well, and I think it's a good option if you happen to already have a KitchenAid stand mixer. There is a relatively local company that sells 5 or 6 different types of grains grown locally. They mill and sell the flour, but they also sell the whole grains. In this first footage, I was milling red fife, which is a type of high protein wheat, and I later milled einkorn, which is a fancy type of ancient grain. For this first experiment using the mill, I really just wanted to taste the different types of flour. So we were basically making very, very basic flour tortillas. I initially bought 4 types of grains, but for this comparison, we were just testing the red fife and the einkorn, and we were also testing leaving the flour whole and sifting out the bran. For the flour tortillas, we were also using essentially 100% freshly milled flour, although for the sifted flour tortillas, we did need to add a little bit of all-purpose flour because the yield was a little low. And before I get into the results of this first experiment, I also want to briefly talk about the first batch of bread I made with this fresh flour. I'm still very much developing as a bread baker, and there are definitely some challenges trying to use sourdough and freshly milled flour. So I don't really think it's enough to make a full video about yet, but I will show some photos and talk about it a little bit. I was using a recipe I've adapted from a few different recipes for milk bread using my homemade creme fraiche, but a similar tangzong or water roux technique. I was using my sourdough starter that I had recently started feeding freshly milled flour mixed with all-purpose flour, but I did add a tiny pinch of commercial yeast as well, and I was using roughly 40% freshly milled flour, this time a mixture of red fife and spelt flour. Spelt flour might be another type of whole wheat you have seen in stores. Spelt flour is a little lower in protein, so by combining it with red fife, you get a protein content similar to all-purpose flour. And for this bread, I did entirely sift the flour because I didn't want any bran. I'm sure there's improvements I could make, but it's definitely the best loaf of bread I have personally made. I was also really happy with the amount of flavor, given that it was only 40% of the fresh flour. And with that basic topic out of the way, let's go back to the flour tortillas that I made first. One of my worries with buying a mill is that it wouldn't really make a big difference. But I would say so far the freshly milled flour and the different types of grain do have a really excellent and distinct flavor. The red fife tastes what you imagine whole wheat flour tastes like, nice and nutty and maybe a little earthy, but not sweet at all compared to spelt, which has a little bit of graham cracker sweetness to it. The einkorn is a type of wheat, but it does, funny enough, taste more like a cornmeal or durum flour type thing with a very savory flavor, almost borderline nutritional yeast, cheesy type of flavor. And the sifted versus whole flour had a slightly different flavor, but was mostly a textural difference. With a freshly milled sifted flour, you are removing the bran, but you still get a good amount of flavor from the wheat germ that makes it through. But again, even though the sifted flour tortillas contained some all-purpose, I was really happy with the flavor. As I mentioned with the loaf of bread that was only 40% fresh flour, I think the ratio of specialty flour to all-purpose and flavor isn't exactly a linear relationship, so that's going to be fun to explore. But that is pretty much it for this video. I think freshly milled flour is going to be a big ongoing theme for this channel going forward. I hope everyone watching is doing well with the whole situation going on. If you have any cooking or food related questions, feel free to ask in the comments. I may still post next week, but otherwise it will be in 2 weeks. And thank you for watching.